Hey everyone, welcome back to the English Leap podcast, your podcast for easy English conversation, real daily life talk, and simple listening practice.
I'm Jake.
And I'm Anna. So Jake, I want to ask you something. Is there something in your life right now that you know you should do, but you keep avoiding simply because it feels safer not to?
Oh, that's a direct question this early in the episode.
I like to keep you on your toes.
Honestly, yes. For a long time now, I've thought about starting to teach a small English workshop in person, live, in front of real people. And every time I think about it seriously, I just quietly talk myself out of it.
That's such a relatable feeling. What usually stops you?
Mostly fear, I think. Fear of being judged, fear of forgetting what to say, fear of just feeling awkward in front of a group. So I stay comfortable doing what I already know. This podcast, familiar routines, and I avoid that bigger, scarier step.
And I think almost everyone listening right now has their own version of that story, something they're avoiding simply because staying where they are feels safer.
Exactly. And that's really the heart of today's topic. Today we're talking about comfort zones, why they feel so safe, and why, despite that feeling, they're often not actually as safe as they seem.
This is such an important topic because so much of a fulfilling, meaningful life happens just outside that comfortable, familiar space, yet our brains are wired to resist leaving it.
Right, and we'll also connect this to English learning too, since speaking a new language is honestly one of the clearest, most common comfort zone challenges people face.
I think that workshop idea of yours sounds genuinely great, by the way. Maybe by the end of this episode, you'll feel a little closer to actually trying it.
No pressure, right?
A little pressure maybe, but a gentle, encouraging kind. Before we start, quick reminder. If you enjoy this episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a gentle push today.
And tell us in the comments, what's one thing sitting just outside your comfort zone right now?
Okay, let's get into it.
Let's start simple. Anna, how would you define a comfort zone?
I'd say it's a mental and emotional space where everything feels familiar, predictable, and safe, where you know exactly what to expect and there's little risk of failure, embarrassment, or discomfort.
Right, and I think it's worth saying comfort zones aren't inherently bad. They serve a real important purpose, offering stability, rest, and a sense of security in our daily lives.
Exactly. The problem isn't the comfort zone itself, it's staying there permanently, avoiding growth and new experiences simply because they feel unfamiliar or uncomfortable.
Right. A comfort zone becomes a problem specifically when it quietly turns into a limitation, something that keeps us smaller than we actually want to be.
And I think that's exactly why comfort zones are so tricky. They genuinely do offer real safety and comfort in the short term, which makes them so easy to justify staying inside of, even when we know deep down we're missing out on something more.
I also think it's worth clarifying everyone's comfort zone looks completely different too. What feels comfortable and easy for one person might feel genuinely terrifying for someone else, and vice versa.
Right, so there's no universal standard for what counts as outside your comfort zone. It's always personal, relative to your own specific history, experiences, and current life circumstances.
Exactly. Which means today's episode isn't really about pushing everyone toward the exact same kind of challenge. It's more about recognizing your own personal comfort zone and gently, thoughtfully choosing to expand it in ways that matter to you specifically. Let's talk about why comfort zones feel so genuinely safe, even when staying there might not actually serve us well long-term.
Right. So from a survival perspective, our brains are wired to avoid uncertainty and risk. Historically, unfamiliar situations often meant real danger, so our brains developed a strong instinct to prefer the known over the unknown.
Right, and that instinct hasn't really changed, even though most modern comfort zone challenges, like public speaking or having a difficult conversation, aren't actually life-threatening at all.
Exactly. Our brains still react to unfamiliar, uncomfortable situations with a similar alarm response, even when the real danger is minimal or completely absent.
So when we consider stepping outside our comfort zone, our brain often reacts as if we're facing genuine danger, triggering anxiety, hesitation, and a strong pull back toward the familiar.
Right, and that emotional reaction feels so real and convincing that it's easy to mistake it for actual danger rather than recognizing it as an outdated, overly cautious survival instinct.
That's such an important distinction. Our comfort zone genuinely feels safe because our brain is telling us it's safe, even when rationally we know the discomfort we're avoiding isn't actually dangerous.
I also think it's worth mentioning that comfort zones offer something else too, a sense of competence. Inside our comfort zone, we usually feel capable and skilled, since we're doing things we already know how to do well.
Right, and stepping outside that zone often means temporarily feeling incompetent again, like a beginner, which can feel almost as uncomfortable as the fear of actual danger, even though it's really just the discomfort of relearning and adapting.
Exactly. So comfort zones aren't just about physical or emotional safety. They're also deeply tied to our sense of identity and competence, which makes stepping outside them feel even more threatening than it logically should. Okay, Jake, tell us about a time you actually stepped outside your comfort zone and what happened.
Sure. Years ago, before starting this podcast actually, I was terrified of speaking on any kind of recording. Even just my own voice on a voice message felt uncomfortable to me.
Really? That's surprising considering what you do now.
I know, it's funny looking back, but at the time, the idea of recording my voice for other people to listen to felt genuinely terrifying. I avoided it for years.
So what changed?
Honestly, a friend convinced me to just try recording one short, simple audio message. Nothing public, just for practice, sent privately to just her.
That sounds like a small, low-risk first step.
Exactly. And even that small step felt uncomfortable. My voice sounded strange to me. I stumbled over words, but nothing terrible actually happened. The world didn't end. She didn't judge me harshly. It was just uncomfortable, briefly.
And that small step led to bigger ones eventually?
Right. Slowly, over time, I recorded a few more messages, then some short videos, and eventually, years later, here we are, doing a public podcast together, something my past self would have found completely unimaginable.
That's such a powerful example of how comfort zones can quietly limit us for years, based on fear that, once actually tested, often turns out to be far less dangerous than it felt.
Exactly. And honestly, looking back, I realize how much of my early hesitation was really just fear of an imagined, exaggerated danger, not any real, actual risk.
Did the discomfort completely disappear after that, or did it take longer than you expected?
Honestly, it took a while, longer than I initially hoped. Even after that first message, I still felt nervous recording the first few videos and even our first few podcast episodes together.
That's actually really reassuring to hear. I think people sometimes expect discomfort to disappear instantly after one brave step, when really it usually fades gradually with repeated practice.
Exactly. And I think that's an important thing to mention. Stepping outside your comfort zone once doesn't magically make everything comfortable forever. It's more like slowly, repeatedly expanding the edges of what feels familiar.
Right. Each repetition makes it just a little more comfortable than the time before, until eventually what once felt terrifying becomes completely normal.
Exactly. And now, honestly, recording this podcast every week feels as natural to me as any other familiar part of my routine, which still amazes me sometimes, considering where I started. Anna, your turn. Tell us about your own comfort zone experience.
Mine is about traveling alone, actually, something I avoided for years, always waiting for a friend or family member to travel with me.
That's such a common comfort zone barrier, especially for solo travel specifically.
Right. The idea of navigating an unfamiliar place completely alone without anyone to rely on felt genuinely frightening to me, even though logically I knew millions of people travel alone safely every single day.
So what eventually pushed you to try it?
Honestly, a trip I really wanted to take just happened to fall during a period when no friends or family were available to join me. I had to choose between missing the trip entirely or finally going alone.
And you chose to go.
I did. Nervously, but I went. And that first solo trip, while genuinely uncomfortable at times, especially navigating things alone in an unfamiliar place, turned out to be one of the most rewarding experiences of my life.
What surprised you most about it?
Honestly, how much I actually enjoyed the freedom of it, making all my own decisions, moving at my own pace without needing to compromise with anyone else's preferences or schedule.
That's such a beautiful discovery. Something that was hiding just outside your comfort zone the whole time, waiting to be found.
Exactly. And now solo travel has become something I genuinely look forward to, rather than something I avoid out of fear, which honestly feels like such a huge shift from where I started.
Do you remember a specific uncomfortable moment during that first solo trip? Something that felt hard in the moment but turned out fine?
Oh, definitely. I remember getting slightly lost trying to find my accommodation in a completely unfamiliar city without reliable internet access at that moment. My heart was racing and I genuinely felt a little panicked.
That sounds stressful, especially completely alone.
It was in that specific moment, but I figured it out. Asked a local shop owner for directions using very simple, basic language, and found my way within about 20 minutes.
And how did you feel once you actually arrived?
Honestly, proud and a little amazed at myself. That moment specifically became one of my favorite memories from the whole trip, even though in the moment I would have given almost anything to avoid it.
That's such a perfect example of exactly what we're talking about today. The discomfort was real and sharp in the moment, but brief, and what remained afterward was genuine pride and growth.
Exactly. And honestly, that specific memory is now one of my favorite parts of the whole trip to tell people about, even though in the moment I would have given almost anything to avoid it.
I think it's worth talking specifically about what's actually waiting on the other side of a comfort zone, since that's really the whole point of stepping outside it.
Right. Growth, new skills, new experiences, deeper confidence. These are usually found specifically outside our comfort zone, in that slightly uncomfortable but genuinely manageable space.
There's actually a helpful way to visualize this, sometimes called the comfort zone model. Picture 3 circles, one inside the other. The innermost circle is your comfort zone, familiar and safe.
Right, and just outside that is what's often called the growth zone or learning zone, where things feel a little uncomfortable, a little uncertain, but genuinely manageable.
And then there's an outer circle, sometimes called the panic zone, where the challenge is so far outside your current ability or readiness that it becomes overwhelming rather than productive.
Right, so the goal isn't necessarily jumping straight into that outer panic zone. That's usually not helpful either. The real goal is spending more time in that middle growth zone, that slightly uncomfortable but genuinely manageable space.
I also think it helps to picture these zones as somewhat flexible, not fixed lines drawn permanently in place. What counts as your growth zone today might have been your panic zone a year ago, before you built up more experience and confidence.
Right, and similarly, something that felt like a stretch last month might already feel comfortably familiar now, simply because you've practiced it enough times for it to shift inward into your actual comfort zone.
Exactly. So really, this whole process is dynamic, moving, rather than a one-time decision about which zone something belongs to permanently.
That's such an important distinction. Comfort zones aren't the enemy, and neither is discomfort itself. It's really about finding that healthy middle ground where real growth actually happens. I also think this model is helpful because it removes the pressure of thinking growth requires extreme, dramatic action. You don't need to jump into the panic zone to grow. You just need to spend a little more time in that manageable middle space.
Right, and honestly, most meaningful, lasting growth happens exactly there, in that growth zone, rather than occasional, extreme, overwhelming leaps that are hard to sustain or repeat.
Exactly. Sustainable growth looks a lot more like regularly, gently visiting that middle zone, rather than rarely, dramatically visiting the panic zone and then retreating afterward. Let's talk about the second half of today's title, why comfort zones aren't actually as safe as they feel despite that strong feeling of safety.
Right. So while comfort zones do offer real short-term emotional safety, staying there permanently often creates real long-term costs, even though those costs are much less immediately visible.
Exactly. Think about missed opportunities, relationships never formed because of fear of rejection, careers that stagnate because of fear of asking for a promotion or trying something new, skills never developed because of fear of looking foolish while learning.
Right. These costs accumulate quietly over months and years, without the same immediate, sharp sting of a single moment of discomfort or embarrassment.
That's such an important point. The pain of staying in your comfort zone too long is usually slow, quiet, and cumulative, while the pain of stepping outside it is usually sharp but brief.
Exactly. And because our brains are naturally more sensitive to immediate, sharp discomfort than slow, distant costs, we tend to overweight the fear of stepping out and underweight the real cost of staying in.
Right. That's honestly one of the sneakiest tricks our minds play on us. Comfort zones feel safe specifically because their real cost is so well hidden, spread out quietly over a long period of time.
I also think it's worth mentioning what this hidden cost can eventually feel like if it accumulates for long enough. Often a quiet, persistent sense of regret or a nagging feeling of what if about paths never taken.
Right, and that kind of regret can feel far heavier and longer lasting than the brief, sharp discomfort of actually trying something and having it not go perfectly.
Exactly. So in a strange way, avoiding short-term discomfort often trades it for a much larger, longer-lasting discomfort down the road, which is really the opposite of what staying safe was supposed to achieve. Let's clear up a few myths before continuing.
These are ideas that often keep people stuck longer than necessary, so hopefully clearing them up helps a few of you listening feel a little more ready to take that first small step. Myth 1. If something feels uncomfortable, it means I shouldn't do it. Discomfort isn't automatically a warning sign. It's often simply a sign of unfamiliarity, which is very different from actual danger.
Right, learning to tell the difference between this is genuinely unsafe and this is just unfamiliar is honestly one of the most valuable skills for personal growth.
Myth 2. People who step outside their comfort zone don't feel fear. Actually, most people who regularly do challenging, growth-oriented things still feel fear and discomfort. They've just learned to act despite that feeling, rather than waiting for it to disappear first.
Right, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward even while feeling it.
I think that reframe alone is really liberating because it means you don't need to wait to stop feeling scared before taking action. You can simply act alongside the fear rather than waiting for it to disappear first. Myth 3. Once I expand my comfort zone in one area, it automatically expands everywhere else too. Unfortunately, comfort zones tend to be fairly specific. Being confident in your career doesn't automatically make public speaking or speaking a new language feel comfortable too.
Right. Each area often needs its own gradual, gentle expansion, rather than assuming courage in one area will fully transfer to every other area of life.
Right, so if you feel confident in one part of your life but still nervous in another, that's completely normal, not a contradiction or a sign of failure.
Let's go through a few common comfort zones people tend to get stuck in.
Career comfort zones.
staying in a familiar but unfulfilling job, avoiding asking for a raise or promotion, or avoiding switching careers entirely simply because change feels riskier than staying put, even when staying put isn't truly satisfying.
Right, and I think this is especially tricky because a familiar job often comes with real tangible benefits, a steady paycheck, familiar colleagues, which makes the comfort zone feel not just emotionally safe but practically justified too.
I think that's exactly why career comfort zones are so common. They're rarely purely irrational. There's usually a real practical trade-off involved, which makes the decision genuinely harder than simply just be brave.
Social comfort zones, avoiding new friendships, staying only within a small, familiar social circle, or avoiding difficult but necessary conversations with people we care about.
Right, and this comfort zone often becomes more pronounced as we get older, since making new friends naturally requires more initiative and vulnerability than it did during school or university, where social opportunities were built into daily life.
That's such a good point. Adult friendships often require actively choosing discomfort, reaching out first, suggesting plans, being open about wanting connection, none of which happened as automatically as it did when we were younger.
Learning comfort zones, avoiding new skills or subjects simply because being a beginner again feels uncomfortable, especially after becoming skilled and confident in other areas of life.
Right, there's something particularly humbling about being genuinely bad at something new, especially once you're used to feeling competent and capable in your usual areas of expertise.
I think that's such an honest observation. The more skilled we become in one area, the more uncomfortable it can feel to voluntarily become a beginner again in something completely unrelated.
And of course, connected directly to this podcast, avoiding actually speaking a new language out loud, staying comfortably in silent listening or reading, rather than risking mistakes in real conversation.
Right. This is honestly one of the most common comfort zones for English learners specifically, understanding much more than they're willing to actually speak.
I think this comfort zone is especially sneaky too because passive listening and reading genuinely do feel productive, so it's easy to convince yourself you're making real progress while quietly avoiding the specific skill, speaking, that actually requires stepping outside comfort.
Physical comfort zones. Avoiding new physical activities, new types of exercise, or new environments, simply because unfamiliar physical experiences can feel awkward or intimidating at first.
Right, like trying a new sport as an adult, where everyone around you might already have experience, and you're starting completely from scratch, feeling visibly clumsy in front of others.
I think this one is particularly tough because physical mistakes tend to feel very visible. Other people can literally see you stumble or struggle, unlike, say, a private moment of confusion while studying alone.
Right, that visibility adds an extra layer of vulnerability, which makes physical comfort zones especially challenging for a lot of adults to step outside of.
Let's get practical now. How can someone actually start stepping outside their comfort zone without feeling overwhelmed or forcing themselves into the panic zone we talked about earlier?
Strategy 1. Start with small, manageable steps.
This connects perfectly to our small steps episode. Instead of a huge, dramatic leap outside your comfort zone, find a small, manageable step into that middle growth zone.
Right, like my solo travel story or Jake's private voice message. Small, low-risk steps that still stretch you slightly beyond total comfort. I think a helpful question here is, what's the smallest version of this challenge that would still genuinely stretch me without tipping into overwhelming panic?
Right, that question helps calibrate the step correctly, neither too small to matter nor too big to actually attempt.
Strategy 2. Reframe discomfort as a sign of growth.
Instead of interpreting discomfort as danger, try consciously reframing it as a sign that you're actually growing, since growth almost always involves some degree of unfamiliar discomfort.
Right, this small mental shift from "this feeling means danger" to "this feeling means I'm growing" can genuinely change how manageable the discomfort feels in the moment.
I actually started using a simple phrase for this myself, quietly telling myself, this is growth, not danger, whenever I notice that familiar, anxious feeling creeping in.
That's such a simple, practical tool, a short phrase you can repeat right in the moment rather than needing a whole complicated mental process.
Strategy 3. Focus on the story you'll have afterward.
Here's a small trick I personally use. I think about the story I'll be able to tell afterward rather than focusing only on the uncomfortable moment itself.
Right. Almost every meaningful personal story involves some uncomfortable moment of stepping outside comfort first. Focusing on that future perspective can make the present discomfort feel more worthwhile.
Right, and honestly, thinking back on my own comfort zone stories today, the uncomfortable moments themselves are barely memorable anymore, but the growth and confidence that came afterwards is what really stayed with me.
I think that's true for almost everyone. Looking back years later, we rarely remember the specific embarrassment or awkwardness in detail, but we do remember and value the growth and new abilities that came from pushing through it. Strategy 4. Accept that some discomfort is temporary. Remind yourself that the sharp discomfort of stepping outside your comfort zone is usually temporary, while the growth and confidence gained often lasts much longer.
Right, this connects back to what we said earlier. Sharp but brief discomfort versus slow hidden costs of staying too comfortable for too long.
I think it also helps to set a specific small time expectation, telling yourself this will feel uncomfortable for maybe the next 10 minutes, rather than imagining the discomfort will last indefinitely.
That's such a practical mental trick. Giving discomfort a clear, expected endpoint makes it feel far more manageable than an open-ended, undefined feeling of unease.
Strategy 5. Build a support system. Having someone supportive alongside you, whether that's a friend, mentor, or even an online community, can make stepping outside your comfort zone feel significantly less intimidating.
Right, like my friend who encouraged that very first private voice message. Having someone in your corner really does make a meaningful difference.
I think this connects to our motivation episode too. Reaching out for support isn't a sign of weakness. It's actually a really effective, practical strategy for facing challenges more successfully.
Right, and honestly, almost every comfort zone story we've shared today involved some form of support. A friend, an online community, a small course. Nobody really does this completely alone.
Strategy 6. Celebrate the attempt, not just the outcome.
And finally, celebrate simply making the attempt, regardless of how smoothly it actually goes, rather than only celebrating a perfect outcome.
Right. The courage to step outside your comfort zone at all is genuinely worth celebrating, separate from whether the specific attempt goes exactly as planned.
I think this last strategy is honestly one of the most important, because if we only celebrate perfect outcomes, we quietly discourage ourselves from trying again after an imperfect attempt, which defeats the whole purpose of gradually expanding our comfort zone.
Right, and celebrating the attempt itself, regardless of outcome, is really what builds the habit of continuing to try, which matters far more long-term than any single result.
Let's connect this directly to English learning now, since it's such a perfect, relevant example of today's topic.
Right. So many learners spend years comfortably listening, reading, and studying grammar while avoiding the genuinely uncomfortable step of actually speaking out loud, especially with native speakers or in front of others.
And that comfort zone, while understandable, can quietly limit someone's real fluency and confidence for years, even decades, without ever truly being tested or overcome.
Right. And just like our strategies today, the solution isn't necessarily jumping straight into a huge, terrifying conversation. It's finding small, manageable steps into that growth zone.
Exactly. Maybe that's speaking just one sentence out loud alone in your room, then perhaps with a trusted friend, then eventually, gradually, with strangers or in more public settings.
Right. And remembering that any awkwardness or mistakes along the way are simply temporary, sharp discomfort, while the growing confidence and fluency genuinely last much longer.
I really think this comfort zone idea might be the single biggest hidden barrier for a lot of English learners. More than grammar, more than vocabulary, simply the discomfort of actually speaking out loud.
I also want to add, this podcast itself is designed to sit right in that manageable growth zone. Listening to natural conversation is a little more challenging than complete silence, but far more comfortable than being forced into a live conversation immediately.
Right, and hopefully, over time, listening regularly gradually expands your comfort zone just enough that speaking, when you're ready to try it, feels a little less intimidating than it might have felt starting from complete silence.
Exactly. So simply continuing to listen to episodes like this one is already a small, gentle step in the right direction, even before you ever say a single word out loud yourself. We received a really encouraging message from a listener that fits this topic perfectly.
Oh, tell us.
She said she understood English quite well for years through reading and listening, but avoided speaking completely out of fear of making mistakes in front of others.
That's such a common, relatable comfort zone specifically for language learners.
Right, and she said the turning point came when she finally joined a small, casual online conversation group, specifically for beginners, where everyone understood mistakes were a normal, expected part of the process.
That sounds like a perfect example of finding that manageable growth zone, rather than jumping straight into an intimidating, high-pressure conversation.
Exactly. And she said the first few sessions were genuinely uncomfortable. Her heart raced, she stumbled over words, but nothing terrible happened. And slowly, session by session, that discomfort noticeably decreased.
And now?
Now, she says speaking English feels like a completely normal, comfortable part of her life, something she genuinely enjoys rather than something she fears, all because she was willing to tolerate that initial, temporary discomfort.
We also received a second story from a listener who wanted to change careers after many years in the same familiar job, but felt paralyzed by fear of starting over.
Oh, that's such a significant, life-changing kind of comfort zone challenge.
Right. He said he stayed in a job he didn't particularly enjoy for almost 8 years, simply because it felt safer than the uncertainty of switching to something new.
That's such a long time to stay somewhere out of fear rather than genuine satisfaction.
Exactly. And he told us the turning point was taking one small step, enrolling in one single evening course related to the new career he was interested in, without committing to actually switching jobs yet.
That's such a smart, low-risk first step, testing the water without fully leaving the safety of his current situation.
Right. And he said that one small course led naturally to a second step, then a third, gradually building both skill and confidence until switching careers eventually felt like a natural, well-prepared decision, rather than a terrifying leap into the unknown.
That's such a great example of exactly what we discussed earlier, small, manageable steps into the growth zone, rather than one huge, overwhelming leap straight into the panic zone.
And he mentioned 8 years ago, if someone had told him he'd eventually switch careers successfully, he wouldn't have believed it. The whole idea felt completely impossible from where he was standing at the time.
That's honestly such a hopeful thought for anyone who feels stuck right now. What feels impossible today can look completely different after even a few small, consistent steps.
I also want to mention something important. Comfort zones aren't fixed. They can actually shrink over time if we consistently avoid challenging them.
Oh, that's an interesting, slightly concerning point. Can you explain more?
Right. If you avoid new social situations for long enough, social situations in general can start to feel increasingly uncomfortable, even ones that once felt manageable.
So the comfort zone isn't just staying the same size, it can actually get smaller and smaller the longer we avoid stepping outside it.
Exactly, which is honestly one of the more compelling reasons to occasionally gently challenge your comfort zone, even in small ways, simply to keep it from quietly shrinking over time.
That's such an important insight because it means comfort zones aren't just a barrier standing between you and growth. Avoiding them completely can actually make future growth even harder down the road.
Right. The good news, though, is that comfort zones can also expand again with practice, just like they can shrink with avoidance. So it's never too late to start gently pushing those edges outward again.
I want to share a quick, simple exercise listeners can try right after this episode if they want to start applying today's topic immediately.
Oh, I like practical exercises. Let's hear it.
Take 60 seconds right now and think of 3 small things sitting just outside your comfort zone. Nothing dramatic, just 3 small, specific possibilities.
Right. Maybe one related to English, one related to a relationship or social situation, and one related to anything else personally meaningful to you.
Then simply choose the smallest, easiest one of the 3 and commit to trying it sometime this week. Nothing more complicated than that.
I really like how simple this exercise is. It doesn't require any special planning or preparation, just honest reflection and one small commitment.
Right, and honestly, even just naming these 3 things without acting on them immediately already starts shifting your relationship with your own comfort zone, simply by making the avoidance a little more visible and conscious.
We got a thoughtful question. How do I know if I'm in the healthy growth zone or if I've pushed myself too far into the overwhelming panic zone?
That's such an important, practical question. I think a helpful sign of the growth zone is feeling nervous or uncomfortable, but still generally capable, like you can handle the situation, even if it's not easy.
Right, whereas the panic zone often feels more like genuine overwhelm, where clear thinking becomes difficult and the discomfort feels less like productive stretching and more like real distress.
Exactly. And if you consistently find yourself in that overwhelming panic zone, it's usually a sign to scale the challenge back down to something more manageable, rather than pushing through regardless.
Right. Growth works best incrementally, gradually expanding your comfort zone step by step, rather than repeatedly forcing yourself into completely overwhelming situations.
We also got a follow-up question. What if I try something outside my comfort zone and it genuinely goes badly? Not just uncomfortable, but a real disappointing failure.
That's such an honest, important question because sometimes stepping outside your comfort zone really doesn't go smoothly, and pretending that never happens wouldn't be truthful.
Right. In that case, I think it helps to separate the outcome from the decision to try. The attempt itself was still a genuinely brave, worthwhile action, even if this particular result wasn't what you hoped for.
Exactly. And a disappointing outcome doesn't necessarily mean stepping outside your comfort zone was the wrong choice. Sometimes it simply means this particular attempt needs adjustment, more preparation, or a different approach next time.
Right. Even genuine failures usually still provide valuable information and experience, which is itself a form of growth, even when it doesn't feel that way immediately afterward.
I think reframing failure this way, as information rather than a final verdict on your worth or ability, makes it much easier to keep trying rather than retreating permanently back into the comfort zone after one difficult experience.
I stepped outside my comfort zone and it turned out better than I expected.
This feels uncomfortable, but I know it means I'm growing.
I took a small step first instead of a huge, scary leap.
Staying too comfortable for too long has its own hidden costs.
I finally spoke English out loud, even though I felt nervous.
Let's also try a couple of slightly longer sentences.
Even though it felt scary, I reminded myself the discomfort would only be temporary.
I chose a small, manageable step instead of jumping straight into something overwhelming.
My comfort zone has grown a lot since I started challenging it gently, one small step at a time.
Try saying one of these sentences out loud today, maybe adjusting it to describe your own comfort zone challenge.
And if you're feeling brave, try recording yourself saying it, just for practice, the way Jake did all those years ago.
Let's review a few useful words from today's episode.
First, familiar, meaning something well-known.
comfortable and not new or unusual.
For example, staying in a familiar routine feels safe even when it isn't truly satisfying.
Next, to stretch yourself, meaning to challenge yourself slightly beyond your current comfort or ability.
For example, I tried to stretch myself by speaking English with a stranger.
We also use the word overwhelming, meaning something that feels like too much to handle at once.
For example, the challenge felt overwhelming, so I scaled it back to something smaller.
And finally, cumulative, meaning something that gradually builds up over time, little by little.
For example, the cost of staying too comfortable is cumulative, building quietly over months and years.
One more useful word, to tolerate, meaning to accept or endure something uncomfortable without necessarily enjoying it.
For example, I learned to tolerate the discomfort of speaking English, and it got easier with practice.
And resilient, meaning able to recover quickly from difficulties or handle challenges without being overwhelmed.
For example, stepping outside my comfort zone regularly has made me more resilient over time.
Try using one or two of these words today, maybe in a comment describing your own comfort zone challenge.
And one final word, gradually, meaning happening slowly and steadily over time rather than suddenly.
For example, my comfort zone gradually expanded, one small step at a time.
We talked about what a comfort zone really is, a familiar, safe space that serves a real purpose, but can also become a limitation.
We discussed why comfort zones feel so genuinely safe, an old survival instinct reacting to unfamiliar situations as if they were dangerous, tied closely to our sense of competence and identity.
We shared our own stories, my experience overcoming fear of recording my voice, and Anna's experience learning to enjoy solo travel.
We introduced the comfort zone, growth zone, and panic zone model, and talked about aiming for that manageable middle ground, remembering that these zones shift and expand with practice over time.
We discussed why staying too comfortable isn't actually safe long-term due to hidden cumulative costs like missed opportunities, unfulfilled potential, and quiet, lingering regret.
We covered common comfort zones people get stuck in: career, social, learning, language, and physical comfort zones.
We discussed practical strategies, starting small, reframing discomfort, focusing on future stories, accepting temporary discomfort, building support, and celebrating attempts.
We connected this to English learning too, and shared a wonderful listener story about overcoming the fear of speaking.
We also shared a second listener story about a career change built on small, gradual steps and talked about how comfort zones can actually shrink over time if never gently challenged.
Before we close, one last small tip. Think of one small, specific thing right now sitting just outside your comfort zone, something small enough to genuinely attempt this week.
Right, it doesn't need to be dramatic. Maybe it's speaking one sentence of English out loud to a stranger, or sending that message you've been avoiding, or trying one new small activity.
Whatever it is, remember, the discomfort will likely be sharp but brief, and whatever you gain from it will likely last far longer than that initial uncomfortable moment.
And if you're not sure what to choose, revisit that 60-second exercise from earlier. 3 small possibilities, then just pick the smallest, easiest one to start with this week. Next time, we're going to talk about something practical and useful, how to make small talk in English, a really valuable skill for everyday conversations, whether at work, with neighbors, or meeting someone new.
And honestly, small talk itself is often its own small comfort zone challenge, so that episode will pair nicely with everything we discussed today.
We're really looking forward to that one too.
In the meantime, we hope today's episode gave you a little encouragement to gently step just slightly outside whatever feels a little too comfortable right now.
If you enjoyed this episode, like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments what's one small step you'll take outside your comfort zone this week.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye!
Bye!